seek desire? Yeah. For and why is that? Because with status, what does one get? Right. I'm sorry. Right. Power, wealth, fame, and even on a smaller level, what are some things that happen? Well, maybe as an individual, but here, I'm not particularly famous, but when people ask me for, right, when people ask me for recommendations, they're like, hey, do you know a good mechanic? And I was like, listen, the way the mechanic deals with me is not necessarily how they'll deal with you, right? Or if I go to a restaurant to go get some food, it's not, the mic's off, it's just really windy, even though it's not windy. It, there's the cordless mic and there's the other one. That's okay. It's okay. Um, so or even on a lesser level, like friends, right? So if I'm friends with someone, or if someone knows me, when I walk into my friend's restaurant, or if I walk into my friend's store, or if I walk in my friend offers a particular service, will that service be the same with me as it is with everyone else? Not necessarily, right? Not necessarily. And more likely, more often than not, no. It's actually not like that. They will usually give me special treatment because of that relationship. And if we look at status, in essence, what is it? It is the relationship of this person to others and toward others. So Imam Ghazali, he's going to spend time now talking about why this is a problem and why this is an issue. And he mentions a couple verses. He says, تلك الدار الآخرة نجعلها للذين لا يريدون علوا في الأرض ولا فساد. So we grant the home and the hereafter to those who do not seek superiority on earth or spread corruption. So over here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he pairs two things. He's saying that if for that individual who actually wants the akhirah, who wants the next life, there are two things that they should not seek. What are those two things? The first one, he says that they should not seek superiority, meaning that they should not seek status, they should not seek fame. And the second is that they should not spread corruption. And it's interesting how Allah Azza wa Jal, He actually pairs these two things together. Um, and this is very similar to, I think we have a parallel. There's like an English idiom, and I'm sure most of you are aware of it, like power. No, huh? Power corrupts. Jazakallah khair, right? Power corrupts. Power corrupts. But it, if you look at the Quran, the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about quwwah, right? When He talks about strength in the Quran, is it used in a negative aspect or in a positive aspect, or is it neutral? Is neutral? Okay. I'm sorry, both? Okay. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, فَعِدُّ مَنِ اسْتَطَعْتُ مِنْ قُوَّةٍ يعني and prepare yourself with strength, with power. Is that being used in a neutral context or in a positive context? It's a positive context, all right? In general, you'll find in the Quran, whenever power is mentioned in and of itself, it's actually mentioned in a positive context. Like, how is power in a negative context in the Quran? Oppression, ascent, right? So the opposite of strength would actually be lun, because that is when power is misused. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He pairs seeking corruption with superiority, and He clarifies that the one who seeks the next world is free from seeking either. Right? He's free from seeking either. And this is, again, an important distinction that we had mentioned and we had spoken about last time. The next verse, he says, من كان يريد الدنيا يريد حياة الدنيا وزينتها نوفي إليهم أعمالهم فيها وهم فيها لا يبخسون أولئك الذين ليس لهم في الآخرة إلا النار وحبط ما صنعوا فيها وباطل ما كانوا يعملون. That if any desire the life of this world with all its finery, we shall repay them in full in this life for their deeds. And sometimes we get the question, all right, well, are there not non-Muslims who do good things? Yes, right? There are non-Muslims who donate. There are non-Muslims who now, even for the cause of Gaza and for what's happening in Palestine, they're demanding a ceasefire. They're going out. They're in line with us, and they're fighting. They want to fight oppression and they want to fight injustice. But what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? Their reward is in this world, right? Because essentially they're working for this world, right? Because they're working for this world, their reward will be in this world. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He goes on to say, they'll be given no less, but such people will have nothing in the hereafter but the fire. Their work will here will be fruitless and their deeds futile. Why? Because the one who works for this world, he will reap the rewards in this world, and the one who works for the next will reap the rewards in the next. Does that mean that a person who works for the akhirah will not see some of that benefit in this world? No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. Even if we look to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he wasn't particularly wealthy, right? He didn't have a lot of money. He didn't have a lot of food. He didn't have a lot of land. But in general, was he not healthy? Yes, he was sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? He was healthy. He was fit. He was upright. He was handsome, right? Like there's so many ways that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually blessed him. And this is not, we shouldn't overlook those things. Meaning that we can receive good in this world, and we can receive khair in this world, and we can receive benefit in this world. But the relationship that we have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala isn't that if I pray, Allah is going to give me a nice car, right? Or if I make hajj, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to give me a nice house. Or if I give zakat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to give me healthy children, right? That's not how our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala works. We worship Allah because He's deserving of being worshipped, very simply. And if, out of His infinite bounty and out of His infinite mercy, He decides to bless us with something, that is His individual decision according to His will. So here, Imam Ghazali, he points out saying that the one who wants the zina of this dunya, he says like the ornaments and the beauty of this world, he said the finest ornament of this world is status. Which is interesting, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, inshallah. So over here he says, two wolves free from sheep are as destructive as a man's desire for wealth and honor is to his religion. So basically, he's saying that if you have sheep and you let two wolves loose into the sheep's pen, what happens? Right, they'll go crazy. Right. They won't even know where to start. Right, they won't even know where to start. Unfortunately, I don't know if you guys ever had the opportunity to raise chickens. No. I dress that way for them sometimes. Right. But you don't like my plaid shirt? So I had chickens at one time, and a fox got into the pen. It ate one of the chickens. I had 6. It ate one of the chickens, and it killed the other 5. And I was like, well, why? Why did the fox do that, though? Right? Not just the nature to kill, it got greedy, right? It was only able to eat one, but there were 6 healthy chickens that were there, and it killed all the chickens. So just imagine what happens in our hearts, right? So if we allow that love of status and that love of wealth, what does it do to our deeds? It consumes them in the same way, right? It completely consumes them in the same way. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. So what is jah? Like, what is status? And this is an important conversation. Basically, Imam Ghazali, he says that this dunya is built on 2 pillars. There are 2 pillars that hold this dunya up. What do you guys think those 2 pillars are? And I'm sure one is clear because we're talking about it, right? Wealth and status. Ahsant, right? He said that these 2 pillars are the things that hold up the dunya. And if I want the dunya to collapse in my heart, what do I need to do? Right, I need to bring those 2 pillars down, because these are the 2 things that actually prop up that love of dunya in my heart. So he's like, okay, well, it's important to understand what wealth is. And he says wealth is objects that are owned and benefited from. And that's what he describes as wealth. And this is basically everything that we own. It can actually be money, or it can be objects. And he says, okay, well, what is status? And this is really interesting. He says that status is influencing others, right? The ability to influence others. And he says that there's ownership here too. There's ownership in the first, right? You own objects. What is it that I'm owning in the second when it comes to status? The hearts of others. And he says in both of these things, there's this idea of ownership. And he says, okay, well, someone who is wealthy. And he says, someone who has gold and silver and the ability to spend that and buy whatever it is that they desire. And who is famous. He said, the one who has the hearts of others in his hands. And it could be for a number of reasons. And basically, anytime he asks them for something, what happens? Right? They oblige. This is part of being famous, and this is part of having status. So when we talk about um, fame, one of the important conversations actually to have is you have stages, you have levels of fame, right? Like you have extremely famous, and you have lesser famous, and you might even have local famous. And sometimes even certain settings, there is a power dynamic that comes into play. So someone might, if you have like a rock star, you'll have the fans will listen to that rock star. But what about in a setting where you have a teacher and students, right? Because all of the students know that teacher, that's a local type of fame, and that teacher has now influence on those students. So there's a power dynamic that's created there, and this is that ownership of hearts that he's talking about. And he says wealth is acquired through different ways. So he's like, you can build things, you can offer services, you can sell things, right? This is how wealth is acquired. He says, but to be famous or to have status, this is required. What do I need? Like I can't build anything, right? And there's nothing I can sell. So what do I need to do? How do I become famous? Huh? I'm sorry? Sure, but even if I become a singer here, is every talented singer famous? No. Okay, so what is different between the famous singers and the not famous singers? Because it's possible they both have talent. It's actually even possible that the singer who's not famous is more talented than the other one. Yes. So what makes the difference? Okay. What work toward what? Huh? So what am I trying to acquire, right? With wealth is very clear, right? I'm trying to acquire objects, right? I'm trying to acquire attention. I'm trying to build relationships. And that's essentially what fame is. That's essentially what status is. How do I create the most relationships? Um, and he says here, and this isn't about a person. So does a famous person know their fans? No. But all the fans know him. And for him or for her, there's something that the fans believe about that person. And what are some examples of famous people, like people who are singers? What do people know about that singer? At the most basic level, right? How good that they sing, right? Or how does an educator become famous? How well they teach. How does a politician become famous? How well they speak, right? So there are certain niches and there are certain characteristics that people have that allow them to become famous. And like I said, it's not necessary that a person is good at something so that he becomes famous. Um, so, and sometimes the person might not even have those characteristics. Uh, there's a streamer. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but basically she's a really famous streamer. Her boyfriend would play video games, and she would be the one who's acting like she's playing those games. Meaning that she doesn't have that skill set. But what happened? The people who are watching, they believed she did, right? They believed that these are the skills that she had. So again, it's not even necessary that that famous person has those skills. All you guys are pretty young, but I don't know if you remember Milli Vanilli. So these guys, they were singers, and they didn't know how to sing. They would just lip sync all of their music, but they became extremely famous. So again, it's not necessary that people actually have skills or traits. All that matters is that the people believe that they do. So as our belief in this person, right? As the closer we believe to his perfection, right? The more perfect we believe this person is, how good a singer they are, or how strong they are, or how well they speak. Like the closer to they get to that trait, that of imperfection of that, the more their status, like the more that has an effect on the heart when it comes to wealth and to status. But wealth, we had said, is it's this idea of having things that work for you, right? Having all these objects that serve you. Um, like we live in an era now. What are the things that serve us? Like our home, it serves as a place for shelter. Our cars serve as a place for transportation. Our dishwashers serve as things to wash our dishes, right? These are different ways and different types of wealth that we seek. What's interesting is that when it comes to status, Ghazali says that the heart seeks the same thing, but not from objects, but from but from people. That they want those people. Essentially, the person who's seeking it, they want those people to serve him. So there's the parallel that's there. That this desire of ownership, right? Whether that ownership be over the object or whether it be over the heart of the person. It's control. Essentially, it's control, right? Because the more wealth I have, the more control I have in the things that I can purchase, I can buy. Many times, our own frustration when we go to purchase something, right? When we want something nicer, why do we want it? It's because usually that nicer thing is offering, right? It's offering like a service or something that I want. And this lesser model or this lesser grade, it's missing something that I want, and because it's not serving me the way that I want to be served. Yeah, or we're trying to buy it because we want status, right? So we could buy like a really nice car. You buying an exotic car, right? They're not particularly like functional. they're not particularly effective. Like Lamborghini has 2 seats, right? And you're talking about $1 million car. I can't even use it as a daily driver, right? It's too low to the it's too low to the ground. It's not a practical vehicle. But why am I purchasing it? Just to raise my status. And he says here, status is having the hearts of the people, right? Essentially, that's what it is, right? In order to have status, in order to gain it, it's having hearts of the people. And this is not necessarily a bad thing, right? Because there are individuals, even in our religion, like who has our heart? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? He has our heart. Like everything we hear about him, and the more that we hear about him, the more we want to know about him, and the more we love him sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we believe him to be like a perfect human being. We believe the things that he did. We believe that the characteristics that he had. We believe in the generosity that he showed. We believe in the way that he dealt with others, right? Those are things that we took to heart. And these are the things that we believe about him. And because of that status that we have of him, this is why, because of the love that we have of him, this is why we give him the status that he is deserving of. So what are some examples? It can be through good things and it can be through natural things. So someone's knowledge is obviously they had to acquire that knowledge, they had to put work in. Or somebody is famous because of their worship, manners, like lineage. We don't have control over that. Like we don't have control of what families that we're born into. Some people are handsome, some women are beautiful, some people are strong, naturally strong. Like these are all genetics. Like we don't have control over any of those things. But people do become famous and they do gain status because of these things. And these things, whether we like it or not, they actually bring that love to the heart, right? They bring that status to the heart. And not every model who is in a magazine or on TV is the most beautiful, yes? But again, it's just they were the ones who put the work in to build those relationships so that they become famous. Even though that might not be the case with everyone. But I think this is the end of the chapter. What do you guys think? Do you guys agree? Do you disagree? Do you feel he oversimplified, or do you think this idea of ownership and control really is the fundamental, I would say, flaw that we have in our hearts that needs to be analyzed and looked at? Right. So there are many scholars who avoided. Right. Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi, Sufyan al-Thawri, and I mean, like the list goes on and on, that they actually would avoid seeking these leadership positions. Hmm. Yeah. They all avoided becoming leaders. When they were given leadership, what did they do? They made sure to fulfill their responsibility. Yeah. But it's not something that was sought. So having that sense of awareness, having that sense of control is something that is extremely important. Yeah. Yeah. Seeking fame is haram. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Seeking it is what's problematic. Let me think about that. Yeah, I'm not ready to put a hukum yet. I, I I'm comfortable with saying it's a problem, and I'm comfortable with saying that it can corrupt the heart, but I'm not at a fully comfortable point yet to say that it's actually somebody is sinful for seeking that. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I want them to call me a worshiper, and I want them to think that I'm pious. Um, I'm sorry. Like a what? It's a riyah, right? So it is a riyah issue, right? Because the thing is, remember, we're talking about status and riyah. And why do people do riyah? Like, why do people show off? Because they want to influence others, or they want people to love them, or they want people's attention because of those things. I mean, it could be, right? You know, to seek validation from others. I'm saying even if you look at these things, if I'm seeking validation through others, I'm seeking validation through objects. It's actually very telling of me and my character, right? Like if I need other people to like me, or if I need if I need things, it's very telling of me. And this touches on a lot of the stuff we had spoken about in like previous chapters on like qana, like this idea of being content. Because being content, the problem with these these external factors and like seeking validation from things that are outside of us, what happens? Right, they're temporary, and like it doesn't end, right? So the moment I buy a new car, right? So what models are coming out now? The 24 models, yeah. So if I buy a 2024 model, what happens the moment I purchase it? Right, there's a lot of excitement right up until I get it, right? Like right before I make that purchase, right before I get in the car, there's like a lot of excitement. There's excitement like in the test drive, like you're testing all the stuff, or you know what I mean? Like you're trying it out. And the moment you own it, what happens? It's gone, right? The moment you own it, it's gone. And then what happens? You start looking, and even if the newer model isn't out, what do you start looking? You're like, oh man, what trims are available, right? So it's like, oh, what features? Oh, there's another feature that's not there, or how do I make my car look different? Even if I have the highest trim, like what are some things that I can do to make my car stand out? It doesn't end, and so seeking those outside validations, the problem with them is that they never end, and the only thing that actually stops them is what? Death. Like, that's the only thing that'll stop it. Like the moment that an individual passes away, because there's nothing you can't seek at that point. But up until that point, like, and this is why this idea of qana and being content and being pleased with what Allah Subhanahu wa Taala has given us, it is so important, so that we do not keep on seeking these outside things and outside validation. Yes. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, all I'm saying that it's part of like it's that dopamine rush. Like why do influencers keep posting, right? Yeah, and it's really unfortunate, man. Like a lot of this, a lot of the online culture is, and social media is benign, right? It's a very benign, independent thing. I know there's a lot of like, oh, social media is bad and it's evil and da da da. No, it depends on our attitude toward it and how we're utilizing it, right? It's a tool, just like any other tool. But if I find myself indulging in it, if I find myself like constantly posting so that oh man, how many likes did I get or how many views did I get, right? Like it can get, it becomes a very slippery slope. Um, and sometimes even if you do it like professionally, or even like when we do stuff for the masjid, like oh how, because you need metrics to share with your board, right? When you go and you have a meeting, you're like, okay, well, what did you do this year? It's like, okay, well, these are the videos that we did, and these are how many likes that we had, blah blah blah. And learning how to separate yourself from that, right? It's difficult, right? It's difficult. It's not easy because it's like, okay, well, am I doing this because it's a job requirement, or am I doing it because I really like seeing those thumbs up, right? Or I like seeing those hearts. Yeah. Um, I think that seeking contentment is something that's really important, and always looking internally, analyzing why is he telling us and why is he teaching us how, like all of these things that he's teaching us. These are recognition tools, right? Because the moment I recognize it, what can I do? Right, I can start controlling it. And I can actually tell myself like, okay, no, no, these aren't the right reasons. I need to renew my intention. But this idea of muhasaba, that's exactly what it is. When I take account of myself, when I question myself, and I deal with myself, this is something that's really important. That I learn how to engage myself, and I learn how to recognize. And having honest conversations with ourselves is tough, right? It's a really tough conversation. Nobody likes looking in the mirror and saying like, oh man, I'm ugly, right? And I'm not talking physically, but like my character. Like I have like really ugly character. It's like, oh, I'm mean spirited and like I'm this and that. But even having those realizations, and we had mentioned this before, like that's tawfiq. Like that's a blessing from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. How many people go through life and they never get that realization. But the fact that Allah is allowing me to see myself in that spiritual mirror, it means that I have an opportunity now to change and to fix it. Hmm. As? No, no. I mean, I think, remember, if we go back to the beginning of the book, the whole concept, like he lays out this idea that we, when we view ourselves, essentially, what do I need to do? Like, what is the first step to reset my personal gauge, right? And he's very clear in this. But in order to reset my gauge, I need to push it, right? I need to push it down. I need to push it to its extreme. Does it mean I live my entire life in that extreme? It's not even sustainable, right? It's not even real. Like even Imam Ghazali, what did he do? When he became really big and he became really famous, what did he do? Right, he moved to Damascus, and he was a janitor in the masjid, right? So he moved to Damascus. He was a janitor in the masjid, and he was cleaning. How long did that last? It just lasted like a couple of years. You know what I mean? But the thing is, what was he doing? And that was his journey. What was he doing? He needed to humble himself. He had experienced fame and he had experienced recognition, and he was like, man, I need to clean my heart of this, and that was his journey. That's the way that he did it. Is that the journey I need to take? Maybe not, right? Maybe I need 5 years. Like I don't, you know what I mean? Like everybody's gonna be different, um, but like we all have to approach it in different ways. And how do we determine that? Try different things. Like, and it's very important to try different things. Um, I think one of the things that Ghazali really pushes is this idea of vulnerability, like really being vulnerable and putting yourself in situations where you're not comfortable. Because when we feel that discomfort, that means I'm starting to reach my threshold, right? Like I'm starting to touch on my threshold a little bit. Um, sure. So if I want to reset my hunger gauge, right? I'm like, man, I eat too much. So what do? Right? I fast or I starve myself, right? I go extended periods of time without eating, and I'm like, okay, my stomach's hurting now. What? Like, huh? Right. So there's a different, like, I feel a little bit of hunger. What should I do? Keep pushing, right? I'm gonna push it a little bit. And it's like, okay, now I'm like really hungry. What do I do? I keep pushing, and at what point do I stop? Right? Then, right till I start feeling dizzy. Right? Maybe not that far, but I want to get to a point where now, when I do come across the food, what has my attitude? What happens in the way that I view that? I'm sorry. Right? I start looking at it as a tool, and not just that. I the food. I can appreciate it now, right? The value has changed. And I think that's important even with our worldly things. Like if I have like really nice things, it's like, okay, well, let me try living a week without like these really nice things. Okay, um, I want to learn how to appreciate my car. What is a good way of learning how to appreciate a car? Take the bus, dude. It sucks. Like it's like really like just take public transport and experience it. Because it doesn't matter how terrible my car is. It doesn't matter how beat up it is. The moment that I know I don't have to take the bus and I get in that car, what's gonna happen? Right, I'm gonna kiss the car and be like, Alhamdulillah, like Allah has given me a car. So these are just some ways, in some examples. Or if if I don't overeat, but I don't appreciate food, what can I do? Make the food simpler. It's like, oh, okay. I still remember this. My first cousin, like we went to her house to eat, and we sat down, and I was like, oh, there's too much salt in the food or something like that, and she just picked up my plate, and I was like, what are you doing? She was like, no, no, you don't have to eat. There's too much salt, and I'm just like, I'm just like my mouth, my jaw just dropped, and I'm just looking at her uh, like I didn't know how to deal with it, but sure enough, every time we went to her house, guess what I didn't do? I didn't complain. I didn't say anything. So, they're like I said, there are different strategies. There are different ways to definitely benefit. Um, if we find we're like complaining too much about something, okay, take it away. And alhamdulillah, there are some things that we can't take away, right? Like I can't take away my eyesight, or I can't take away my health. I can't take away those things. But how do I deal with that? Deal with someone maybe who is blind. Go into a hospice. Like go into these spaces where people don't have the same privileges that we do to really learn to appreciate what we do have. So I think these are some strategies and these are some ways for us to benefit from, inshallah. Any other questions? No? Alright. Jazakumullah khair. I'll see you guys next week. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqih, nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sallam. Can we just get some help with the chairs? They just need to be lined up on the sides. No, it's on again. Was it because it was in my pocket? I don't know. Whatever.